November 12, 1970. In Whitehall, London, a 54-year-old career civil servant named Sir Douglas Allen sits in a meeting room and listens to a briefing. The numbers being presented to him are not projections, they are actuals. Britain's industrial output has declined for the 6th consecutive quarter. Strike days lost to labor disputes have exceeded 10 million for the second year running. The pound has been devalued, inflation is rising, and the industries that had made Britain the workshop of the world are being kept alive by government subsidies that the government cannot afford. The briefing room is quiet when the presentation ends. Someone pours tea, and Sir Douglas Allen says the sentence that will haunt British economic policy for the next 20 years. We cannot afford to restructure, and we cannot afford not to. Britain spent the entire decade of the 1970s trapped in that sentence, and the cost of staying trapped was the permanent loss of industrial dominance that Britain has never recovered. Germany is now sitting in that same briefing room, hearing the same numbers, and the silence at the end of the presentation sounds exactly the same. Stay with me. To understand what Germany is walking into, you first have to understand what Britain actually lost in the 1970s. Because it was not just a bad decade, it was a permanent structural demotion that reshaped Britain's role in the global economy for the next half-century. In 1950, Britain was the second largest economy in the world. Its manufacturing sector produced 25% of global exports. British steel was among the largest producers on Earth. British Leyland employed 200,000 people and exported cars across the world. The chemical, aerospace, and heavy engineering industries that had won the Second World War were operating at full capacity, feeding a post-war export boom that filled the treasury and funded the welfare state. By 1979, every single one of those industries was either nationalized, subsidized, or both. British Steel was losing $1 million per day. British Leyland required continuous government capital injections to meet its payroll. The coal industry, protected by the most powerful union in British history, was extracting coal at costs 3 times higher than international market prices, and demanding that the government guarantee its market regardless of cost. The fundamental problem was not laziness or mismanagement, though both existed. The fundamental problem was structural. Britain had built its industrial economy in the 19th century, on 19th century methods, with 19th century capital equipment. By the 1970s, Germany, Japan, and South Korea were manufacturing the same products, with newer factories, newer machinery, and lower labor costs. British industry could not compete on price. And rather than accept the restructuring, successive British governments chose subsidy. Keep the factories open, keep the workers employed, borrow the difference. The result was a decade of stagflation, rising prices and stagnant growth simultaneously, that culminated in the 1976 IMF bailout, the moment Britain, the country that had founded the IMF, was forced to borrow from it. That was the bill for a decade of refusing to restructure. Now here is Germany in 2024. And I want you to watch the sequence with the same precision you would apply to a medical diagnosis, because the symptoms are identical and the prognosis follows the same trajectory. In 2000, Germany was called the sick man of Europe. Reunification costs had burdened the federal budget for a decade. Unemployment was above 10%. Growth was stagnant. The Schröder government implemented the Agenda 2010 reforms and transformed Germany from stagnant to dominant within a decade. By 2015, Germany was the undisputed engine of European prosperity. Its manufacturing sector, anchored by the Mittelstand, thousands of mid-sized precision engineering companies that dominated global niche markets, was the envy of the developed world. German exports exceeded $1.5 trillion annually. The automobile industry alone, Volkswagen, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Porsche, employed 800,000 people directly and supported millions more in the supply chain. BASF, Siemens, ThyssenKrupp, the chemical, electrical, and steel conglomerates that had made Germany the industrial heart of Europe, were operating at full capacity. The entire model rested on 3 structural assumptions that were treated as permanent because they had been stable for so long. Cheap Russian energy, natural gas piped directly to German factories, at prices that made German manufacturing cost competitive despite German wages. Chinese demand. Germany's industrial machine was, in significant measure, an export machine pointed at China's infrastructure and consumer boom, and an open global trading system that rewarded precision manufacturing with unfettered market access. All 3 assumptions broke simultaneously. Here is the critical part, and the speed at which the foundations collapsed is the part the financial press has not fully assembled into a single frame. In February 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. Germany had built 55% of its gas supply dependency on Russian pipelines. Within 12 months, that supply was gone. Germany's industrial electricity prices have risen by 300%. For manufacturers whose manufacturing economy depends on cheap energy, the German manufacturing bill has changed overnight. BASF announced it would permanently reduce its German operations and shift investment to Louisiana and China. Volkswagen, for the first time in its 87-year history, announced it was considering closing factories inside Germany. Not restructuring, closing. ThyssenKrupp's steel division announced permanent capacity reductions. The German chemical sector began a systematic relocation of production to where energy was cheaper. Simultaneously, China, Germany's largest single export market, began producing the products Germany had been selling it. Chinese electric vehicles are not merely cheaper than German ones, they are technically competitive. BYD, ESAC, and NIO are capturing the market segments that Volkswagen and BMW built their China growth on. German car exports to China fell 15% in 2023, then another 10% in the first half of 2024. The trajectory is not a temporary adjustment, it is structural displacement. This is Britain in 1972. The industries that made Germany dominant are facing competitive and structural pressures they cannot resolve through efficiency improvements or management changes. The cost structure is wrong. The energy model is broken. The export markets are being captured by competitors with structural advantages Germany cannot replicate. And here is where it becomes precisely devastatingly British. Germany's political response to structural industrial decline has followed the British playbook with a precision that should alarm anyone who watched what happened to Britain. Rather than accept the restructuring, let uncompetitive production contract, redirect capital toward new competitive industries, absorb the short-term unemployment and political pain, German industrial policy has moved toward subsidy and protection. The German government has committed billions in subsidies to Intel and TSMC to build semiconductor factories in Germany, not because Germany has a competitive advantage in semiconductor manufacturing, but because the government has decided it should. The automobile industry has received billions in electric vehicle transition support. Energy-intensive industries have received electricity price subsidies designed to artificially maintain cost competitiveness that the market no longer supports. This is the National Enterprise Board, the industrial support schemes that kept British Leyland alive for a decade, while preventing the capital reallocation that would have built something competitive in its place. Money spent maintaining yesterday's structure is money not invested in tomorrow's. Meanwhile, Germany's fiscal room for this subsidization is constrained by something Britain did not have to contend with in the 1970s. The constitutional debt brake, the Schuldenbremse, which limits federal structural deficits to 0.35% of GDP. Germany cannot borrow its way through the restructuring the way Britain borrowed its way through the avoidance of restructuring. It must either restructure or find the subsidy money within existing budgets, which means cutting something else. The coalition government collapsed in November 2024 precisely over this question. Who bears the cost of restructuring an industrial economy whose three foundational assumptions have simultaneously collapsed? The SPD wanted to suspend the debt brake and borrow. The FDP refused. The coalition fell. And Germany is entering a period of political uncertainty at precisely the moment when the economic decisions required are the most consequential since reunification. Britain, in 1974, had 3 elections in 2 years over the same question. None of them resolved it. Here is what almost nobody is talking about: the demographic dimension that makes the German version of Britain's 1970s structurally worse. Britain in 1970 had a median age of 34 and a growing workforce. The pain of restructuring, the unemployment, the wage pressure, the loss of industrial communities, fell on a relatively young population with decades of working life ahead to absorb and rebuild. Germany in 2024 has a median age of 46, the 4th oldest population of any major economy on Earth. 40% of Germany's workforce will reach retirement age within the next 15 years. The industrial workers in the Volkswagen plants and the BASF chemical facilities are not 34-year-old workers who can retrain for new industries. They are 52-year-old workers with specialized skills built over decades, facing the closure of the industry those skills were built for. Britain's restructuring was painful but demographically absorbable. Germany's restructuring will fall on a population that has fewer working years to rebuild, a pension system already under demographic pressure, and a political class acutely aware that the workers facing displacement vote in large numbers. This is why the subsidy response, the British Leyland response, is politically irresistible and economically catastrophic. The alternative, letting the displacement happen at market speed, is politically unacceptable, given the demographic profile of who bears the cost. Let me tell you what the British outcome actually looked like, because it is the destination Germany is navigating toward, and the distance between where Germany stands now and where Britain stood in 1979 is shorter than the political calendar suggests. Britain's 1976 IMF bailout was not the nadir. The nadir was the winter of discontent in 1978 to 1979, lorry drivers, hospital workers, and gravediggers striking simultaneously as the government's wage controls collapsed under the accumulated pressure of a decade of structural denial. The images of uncollected rubbish piling in Leicester Square and unburied bodies in Liverpool are the visual record of what happens when the bill for a decade of avoidance finally arrives in a single season. Margaret Thatcher was elected in 1979, not because Britain chose restructuring. Britain chose restructuring because by 1979 there was nothing left to subsidize. The money had run out. The markets had run out of patience. The IMF had already arrived. Restructuring happened because the alternative, continuing, was no longer available. Germany is not yet at 1979. It is at 1973. There is still fiscal room, still political consensus around the importance of the industrial model, still institutional capacity to delay the reckoning. But the trajectory, energy cost disadvantage, Chinese market displacement, demographic pressure on the workforce, political paralysis over fiscal response, runs in one direction. The briefing room Sir Douglas Allen sat in on November 12, 1970, is now a conference room in Berlin. The numbers on the slides have more zeros. The industries have different names. The fundamental sentence at the end of the presentation is identical. We cannot afford to restructure, and we cannot afford not to. This channel exists to find the moment the pattern becomes visible before it becomes inevitable. Subscribe if you want to keep seeing the historical mechanism operating inside current events before the consensus catches up. And I want your argument in the comments. Germany's debt brake prevents it from borrowing through the restructuring the way Britain did. Does that constraint make the German version of this crisis shorter and sharper? Or does it make it politically unmanageable? Drop your answer below. The clearest argument gets pinned.